Welcome to Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go. This audio uses AI narration to present our original book analysis. Today we're going to be taking a deep dive into Mircea Eliade's The Sacred and the Profane.
Oh, a classic.
It really is. It's a foundational text in the study of religion. But don't worry, we're here to help you navigate all those complex ideas. And hopefully we'll uncover some pretty fascinating insights along the way, into the human need for meaning, the power of symbols, things like that.
What's interesting about Eliade is how he approaches religion. He doesn't really get bogged down in, specific doctrines or rituals.
Right.
Instead, he's trying to understand the core experience of the sacred, the thing that seems to be common across so many different cultures.
Yeah. And he introduces this idea of hierophany, which I think is really key to understanding the whole project.
Oh, absolutely. A hierophany. It's basically a moment when the sacred kind of reveals itself in the ordinary world. It could be anything. A tree, a stone, a particular place, even an event. And suddenly, these things that you would normally just walk right by, they become charged with this deeper significance.
So, I'm thinking about how some people describe feeling a sense of awe when they're in a vast cathedral or, when they're contemplating a breathtaking natural landscape.
Exactly. Those could be considered hierophanies.
Okay.
And it's fascinating because these experiences aren't just limited to people who were traditional religious, Even people who consider themselves completely secular, they might have these moments where they feel connected to something bigger than themselves.
So what you're saying is, for Eliade, the sacred isn't just about believing in God or gods.
Right.
It's about, a way of experiencing reality, a way of seeing the world.
Yeah, exactly. It's about perceiving the world as alive with meaning and purpose.
Okay. Now that makes a lot more sense.
And that leads us to his distinction between the sacred and the profane. So for those who experience the sacred, reality is divided into these two realms, right? The profane is the everyday world, the mundane stuff. Work, bills, traffic jams. But the sacred is something totally different. It's a realm of ultimate reality, a source of meaning and power that transcends the ordinary.
So it's like stepping outside of our everyday experience and into something more.
Right. And Eliade argues that this experience of the sacred has been absolutely fundamental to human cultures throughout history. He really focuses on what he calls archaic societies, where the sacred just permeated every aspect of life.
Okay. So we're talking ancient cultures, tribal societies.
Exactly. And those cultures offer a really powerful lens for understanding how the sacred actually operates. Think about how these societies structured their lives around rituals, myths, symbols, and all of it was designed to connect them with that sacred realm.
So every action, every belief, every story was infused with this deeper meaning.
Yes. And that connection wasn't just about feeling good or safe. It was about tapping into a source of ultimate power. A way of aligning themselves with the forces that governed the cosmos.
Wow. That's pretty profound when you think about it.
It is. For those societies, the sacred was the most real thing of all. It was the foundation for their entire worldview. But, that worldview started to shift as societies became more modern.
Right.
And Eliade talks about this process of desacralization where, the world gradually loses its sacred aura.
So as science and technology advanced, our sense of the sacred started to fade away.
Exactly. And he argues that this shift has had a huge impact on how we experience reality. Because without that sense of the sacred, the world can start to feel meaningless.
Like a bunch of random events with no real purpose.
Yeah. But here's the thing. Even though we live in a world that's increasingly secular, Eliade suggests that this human need for the sacred, it hasn't gone away.
It's just hiding out in different forms.
Exactly. Think about our fascination with myths and symbols, in books and movies. Or even the way we mark transitions in our lives, even if those rituals aren't explicitly religious.
So it's we're still looking for those moments of connection to something larger than ourselves.
We are. We're searching for those hierophanies, even if we don't always recognize them for what they are. And that's one of the key insights of the sacred and the profane. Those moments are all around us if we just know how to look.
Okay, so we've got this idea of the sacred and the profane. We've got hierophanies. But how does this actually shape how people live their lives? Eliade talks a lot about sacred space, for example.
Yeah, he argues that for those who experience the sacred, certain places become centers of the world. These are points where the sacred breaks through into the profane.
And these aren't necessarily just geographical locations, right?
No, they're points of access to something more.
Okay, so that makes me think of how different cultures designate specific places for worship or spiritual practice. temples, shrines, even entire cities that become imbued with this sense of the sacred.
Exactly. And these sacred spaces aren't just about escaping the everyday world. They're about connecting with a source of power and meaning, a way of aligning oneself with the cosmos.
And this idea of sacred space, it even extends to the human body, right? Eliade talks about how the body itself can become a microcosm of the universe.
He does. He draws these fascinating parallels between how we build our homes, how we orient our bodies, and the structure of the universe itself. He even talks about how seemingly ordinary acts, like eating or sex, can become these sacred rituals that connect us with the cosmic order.
So for someone who experiences the sacred, the whole world becomes a stage for encountering the divine.
Exactly. Even the most mundane activities can become infused with spiritual significance.
That's a pretty different way of experiencing reality than the one that dominates our modern secular society.
It is. It really is. But Eliade's not saying we need to abandon the modern world and, go live in a cave.
Right.
He's suggesting that we can rediscover these experiences of the sacred even in our everyday lives. And he offers some really interesting insights into how we might do that. And that's something we can dive into a bit later.
Perfect. Let's take a quick break and we'll be right back with more on Mircea Eliade's The Sacred and the Profane.
One of the things that really struck me in The Sacred and the Profane is how Eliade talks about time, in religious cultures. It's not just like the linear progression of days and years like we're so used to.
It's funny you should say that. I was just thinking about how we're always complaining about not having enough time.
Right.
But Eliade saying that, like, religious man or woman, they have this completely different relationship with time.
Oh, absolutely. They see time as cyclical. It's marked by festivals, rituals, things that connect them back to that mythical time of origins. Think about how many religious holidays revolve around the changing seasons or like the cycles of the moon. Those aren't just random dates on the calendar, Okay. They're chances to step outside of ordinary time and tap into something eternal.
So every spring festival, it's not just a celebration of warmer weather.
Right.
It's like reliving the creation of the world.
Exactly. It's a way of renewing the world, reaffirming your place in the cosmic order.
Makes our modern obsession with productivity and progress seem a little bit shallow.
Yeah, well, Eliade argues that our modern linear view of time has come at a cost. We've lost that sense of connection to the eternal, the unchanging, the sacred.
And this brings us back to his idea that modern society has undergone this process of desacralization.
Yeah.
We've stripped the world of its religious meaning and replaced it with this, scientific, rationalistic worldview.
And while that's brought us a lot of amazing things, Eliade suggests that it's also led to a sense of alienation and meaninglessness. Without that connection to the sacred, the world can feel like a pretty cold and empty place.
But even in our desacralized world, those ancient ways of seeing the world haven't completely vanished.
True.
L.A. says we still carry echoes of the sacred within us.
We do. And he points out how those archaic patterns of thought and behavior, they still show up today. In our art, our literature, even our unconscious desires, our anxieties.
So even if we don't consciously practice a religion, we're still influenced by this deep-seated human need for meaning, for purpose, for connection to something larger than ourselves.
Exactly. And that's one of the most powerful things about Eliade's work, He's not just studying ancient religions. He's helping us understand ourselves, our longings, how they shape our experience of the world.
He's challenging us to look beyond the surface of our modern lives and rediscover those traces of the sacred that are all around us.
And one of the places where those traces are most evident is in nature. Eliade sees nature not just as like a pretty backdrop or a source of resources. It's a living manifestation of the sacred.
I love how he talks about how for archaic man, the entire cosmos was sacred. The sun, the moon, the stars, the mountains, the rivers, all of it was imbued with this spiritual significance.
And it wasn't just like a vague sense of wonder. Those ancient cultures developed complex systems of thought for understanding the relationship between humans and the cosmos. They saw themselves as part of a larger web of existence, a sacred order that they were both dependent on and responsible for maintaining.
Their relationship with nature wasn't about domination or exploitation.
No.
It was about respect, reverence, and a deep sense of interconnectedness.
And that's a perspective that we could learn a lot from today as we deal with climate change and environmental degradation.
Eliade doesn't romanticize those archaic societies, though.
No, of course not.
He acknowledges that they had their own share of problems and limitations.
He's not saying we should go back to some idealized past. He's just saying that there are valuable lessons to be learned from those ancient ways of seeing the world. lessons that can help us navigate the complexities of modern life.
One of the things that struck me was how he talked about the importance of ritual in those societies. It wasn't just about empty gestures or superstitions.
Rituals were a way of connecting with the sacred, participating in the cosmic drama, aligning yourself with the forces of the universe. And those rituals often involved enacting myths, those stories that explain the creation of the world, humanity's place within it.
The myths weren't just stories.
Right.
They were like blueprints for living.
By reenacting those myths through ritual, people were able to connect with the sacred and renew their connection to the cosmos.
And it wasn't just about feeling good or safe.
Yeah.
It was about maintaining order, keeping chaos and destruction at bay.
It makes you wonder what our modern world has lost by abandoning those rituals and those myths.
It does.
Eliade suggests that we still crave those experiences. Connection, transcendence. We just express them in different ways now.
Okay.
Think about how people find meaning through art, music, nature, even intense physical experiences.
So even if we're not sacrificing animals or performing those elaborate ceremonies, right?
Those ancient longings for the sacred, they're still within us.
They are. And one of the most interesting things about Eliade's work is how he connects those ancient patterns of thought and behavior to our modern psychological experiences.
I'm thinking about his discussion of initiation rituals, how he sees them as a symbolic death and rebirth, something that lets the individual access a deeper level of reality.
Exactly. And he says those patterns of initiation aren't just in tribal cultures. He sees them reflected in the experiences of mystics, artists, even people who are undergoing psychoanalysis.
So even in the modern world, we're still searching for those transformative experiences.
Yes.
Those moments that shatter our old ways of seeing and open us up to something new and profound.
And Eliade suggests that those experiences are often accompanied by a sense of the sacred, a feeling of connecting with something much larger than ourselves.
That's a powerful idea. It suggests that even in our secular age, the sacred hasn't vanished.
Not at all. It's still there, waiting to be rediscovered if we know where to look. It's funny, as we've been talking about all this, I keep thinking, Eliade's view of religion is so different from how a lot of people see it today.
It is, yeah. I mean, we tend to think about beliefs, institutions, things like that. But for Eliade, it's all about the experience.
That experience of the sacred.
Right, exactly. That encounter with something that's just beyond the ordinary. And he says that's been fundamental to human cultures going way, way back.
Not just their beliefs either.
Yeah.
But their whole society.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Their social structures, art, relationship with nature. He uses this term homo religiosus to describe this kind of archetypal human who sees the world as just saturated with the sacred.
So for them, everything's a hierophany, basically.
Yeah, potentially. The sacred is everywhere. It's not something you just go to church for.
Right.
It's woven into life. And that's what he wants us to get, to see through the eyes of that homo religiosus.
So I understand how powerful that experience was.
Yeah, exactly. But he knows, of course, that way of seeing things. Well, it's been kind of pushed aside by modernity, hasn't it?
With science and technology, yeah. He talks about desacralization.
The world loses its religious meaning.
And that's a huge loss from his point of view.
It is. It's not just losing faith in God. It's losing a whole way of experiencing things.
Of finding meaning in a world that can feel pretty random sometimes.
He even calls it the terror of history. That feeling that it's all just, one thing after another. No real point to it.
But even so, he thinks that need for the sacred, it's still there.
It is. It just pops up in different ways now.
He sees it in how we're drawn to myths, symbols.
In art, literature. That desire for something to take us beyond the everyday.
Like we're still reaching for the sacred.
Trying to connect, yeah. Even if we don't have the same language, the rituals.
And this is where I think Eliade gets really interesting.
Yeah.
Connecting all this ancient stuff to our modern psychology.
Right. Like when he talks about psychoanalysis.
Yeah. Unconscious fears, all that.
Mm-hmm. It's almost like those old initiation rituals.
You confront your monsters. Go through a symbolic death, rebirth.
It's like he's saying, even if we've gotten rid of the rituals, we're still doing them in different ways.
Because deep down, that needs the same. Transformation, meaning, connection.
And maybe, through all that, we can start to see the world differently again. More attuned to that sacred dimension.
So even without the sacrifices and ceremony?
Those longings, they're still with us.
Absolutely fascinating stuff. Well, this has been a really insightful deep dive into Eliade's The Sacred and the Profane.
Challenging book, but worth it if you really want to dig into these ideas.
Changes how you see the world. Definitely recommend checking it out. You can find a link to buy the book in the show notes. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more of our deep dives. Thanks for listening.